A warm welcome to Disky Talk with Luyolo. If you're tuning in for the very first time, I do ask that you please subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you've been a part of this journey, I hope you thoroughly enjoy this episode. So, on today's episode, I'm joined by a very special man, and he goes by the name of Farouk Khan. He is currently a coaching director at the Stars of Africa and an analyst on SUPERSPORT as well. Coach Farouk, how are you?
Very well, Leo. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Coach. I'm
Good,
doing
man.
well. Thank you very much for taking time out to have this conversation. I'm looking forward to the conversation, especially considering the wealth of knowledge that you have when it comes to the beautiful game.
No, thank you. I'm humbled by the introduction. I think there is obviously so much that we can share in football, and hopefully I could give some insight to your interview today.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. So, when you now look back, because you've got all this experience, so you've got over 30 years of coaching and being in the game, you've gained so much knowledge and experience. When you look back to your playing days, in hindsight, what are some of the aspects you look at and think, if I knew that as a player, I would have been a better player?
As a young player, we started playing football in school. When you get to school, the first time you play football, you play with a tennis ball. And you just fall in love with the game. And subsequently, you then join junior football teams in your area. We then were moved out of an area called Vredendorp. It's now Pageview. During the time of the, I think the government called it the Separate Development Act, where they moved people of different nationalities into different areas. And we were moved to Lenasia at the time. Yeah. So I joined a team called Shamrocks, played football for them. But I started playing school football at a very tender age of about 10 and 11. And that was a highlight because school football was so competitive in those days. But there was no coaching. I remember the one coach who was coaching, his name was Ivan Heide, was coaching in the professional leagues at that time in Johannesburg. He was a blessing, and he taught us the basics of how to kick the ball. But obviously at school you didn't have that much time to be coached, so the coaching was limited. And then when you got later on to playing football at amateur level, also coaching was very limited. A lot was about running, doing a lot of running and playing games and maybe doing a couple of push-ups, but there was nothing that you would call coaching in its pure form that we experience today. So that was a bit of a downside, and I think a lot of players learned by doing. Street football was the key. Everybody played street football. On our holiday period, we didn't have the distractions we have today. Today we have so many distractions. We have television, we have iPads. Every child today has a phone. And they spend so much time on the internet, on social media, that they don't have enough time to play. And this is where a lot of us honed our skills and then went on to play in schools. I think some of our best players came from school football. If you look at the time of the likes of Jomo, even Kaizer, all the great players, they played schools football. There was a buzz about it. All the students used to come and support them. And that was really where I think development played a part indirectly. No coaching, but the game itself became the coach.
Yeah. So we fast forward then, and you're playing at Dynamos, and then you pick up an injury. So at which point then do you have the idea of going into coaching, and do you fall in love with coaching? Is it during your playing days, or when you get that injury and then realize that I might have to look for something else going forward?
Well, I think the highest football I played was at the time when I was quite young. I played for Valachi Chiefs, who were playing in the second division in the Federation League. Federation had a professional wing, and then they had a second division. And at this young age, we had so much talent. I had a friend who was late in our shoes, also shoes. I think they keep all good players.
All of them.
And we would after school play football. During holidays, play football. But with the team itself, there was so little coaching. So we just managed to develop on our own pace in our own time. And later on, after getting this injury, it set me back big time, because now you went for the reluctantly. First, I didn't want to go. I thought I'll just run it off. But it was such a bad cruciate injury that it kept on recurring. And after the injury, I didn't go for the rehab, which is also a big mistake, because there was no guidance. Listen, you got to do X, Y, Z to get back to your form. And during that period, that frustration set in. I then found myself now coaching a young team by accident. I was walking one day across the park where I was living, and I saw these kids playing. Saw a gentleman pull up with his car and then pull off, and I asked him, "Listen, is that your coach?" He said, "No, he's our coach, but obviously he's running a business, he can't make it." I said, I'll volunteer, speak to him," and they agreed. And that was the first time I started coaching. And they played in the BFA. The BFA was a Bosman Football Association, very well run league by Barney Gaffney. He's quite old now, but he ran this league like clockwork. All the top teams from around Gauteng used to play in that league because it was so well organized and structured. And I had a team called Mayfair Spurs playing in that league, did quite well. And later on, went on to coach at Dynamos, their youth teams, under Najib Kamruddin. He was the owner. They were sponsored by VNR Motorspares. They had a very good team. I think you can recall when that Zambian plane crashed. There was a number of players that were in that particular team, and we went on then to require from them, listen, I want to improve my knowledge because I don't have enough material. Today we have the advantage of going on the net. We've got books and we can subscribe to different books. But in those days, I'm talking as early as the late 80s, 87, 88, 89. Not much information. And I said to them, listen, I've made contact with people in Brazil because I wrote a letter to the Brazilian Academy and I asked them, listen, can we come? And they gave me the requirements. They said, look, we don't have the funds, but we can send you to somebody. He's based in Orlando Stadium, Ted Dumitru, the legendary Ted Dumitru. He'd already been a coach of Kaizer Chiefs prior to that, and he was now running this Chibuku development program, not only players, but coaches as well. And when I got there, he welcomed me with open arms. You know, he was so welcoming because he was trying to pass his knowledge on. You know, he's come from a Eastern Bloc country, Romania, had a hell of a history where to run away from Romania because as a coach, they weren't paid directly. They were paid through the government, the stipend. And he just felt it's not enough. Eventually got to Swaziland where Kaizer Matoung found him, brought him to Kaizer Chiefs. And spending time with this man was really an inspiration. I mean, this man would call you at 10 o'clock at night and say, Farouk, I've got some good information. He was in Hillbrow and I was in Fordsburg, and I would maybe I would drive through to him. When you get there, we just talk football and just discuss football and the state of football it was in. Then obviously South Africa was readmitted into world football. Bafana came to the fore, and that was also a lot of discussions that we had. We had some outstanding people with us at the time, Shakes Mashaba, Trot Moloto, all of these people, Mike Ntombela, James Mabena, Sam Mbata, Kevin Johnson. We all attended Mackie Chinya. We attended these workshops that Ted had on a Monday night. And that's where we basically laid the foundation for our development. And then I was fortunate in 1992 to be one of the 4 coaches to go and study in Brazil. Ted fought for me. They wanted to send John Layton because this program was attached to University of Witwatersrand. And John was coaching the Witwatersrand professional team, Wits team. And when the discussion came about who should go, they said, okay, they're going to send James Mabena, Mike Ntombela, and John Layton, and Ted said, no way, Farouk has to go. And I was so blessed that when I went there, we thought we knew football. I remember when we got there, Ted said, you'll have the media waiting for you at the airport. And no media was there. There was just one gentleman with a car, and his name was Professor Neto. What a man. He played a huge, huge part in our development. There's so many people that played an important. And then he would come along and he would take us to the place where we lived, you know, in Brazil. And you try to impress him with your knowledge, and you just look at you like, hey, what is this guy talking about? Because we were so excited about this knowledge. And we spent the first week in Rio, which is beautiful. I mean, you walk on the beaches, wow, wonderful place, beautiful ladies, white beaches. And we would be walking on the beach thinking, this is where the academy is going to have the course. Mistake. 3 days later, they load you into a bus, they take you to the mountains where the academy is based, and you see nobody. You get up at 6 in the morning, you have breakfast, you go to the field till lunchtime, so you do practicals until lunch. You then go to the classroom after lunch, you spend time till supper, you go back to the class after supper. So it was a full day's work. They really, for those 6 weeks, they really worked us. But what helped us was we were very inquisitive, so we'd make friends with the professors, because a lot of the guys that were exposed to this type of coaching were not ready for it because it was very scientific. We had guys from Nigeria, etc., but not youth coaches, not amateur coaches, professional coaches, directors of coaching. All these people were sent by the governments to study in Brazil because Brazil was obviously a country well respected. And we just we just stuck in there. We'd buy them drinks in the evening and tap their knowledge, the professors, because the professors lived with us in the complex.
Yeah.
And we did quite well. We finished in the top 5 in that particular course.
Yeah.
Came back, and then obviously Transnet wanted to refocus their image, because they were known as a white parastatal, so they wanted to go into the communities and, you know, obviously do something to show that they also have some sort of a sentiment towards black development as such. So they were going to use Neil Tovey and Phil Masinga to go from area to area and establish a sort of a coaching workshops. And Ted just said, no, you can't do that. It's surrogate coaching. You need to establish yourself in an area. You need to build your capacity in the community. And we chose Alex. And from Alex, we did so well at Alex and the center we had, Chibuku in Orlando, that when I approached Neil later on to approach Transnet for a academy where we had house players and we said 60 players, they agreed. And we were at Esland Park at the time. That's where it all started. That's where the likes of Stephen Pinar, Zita Mofokeng, so many top players, Old John Mabizela, I think even Parker was there. And so many players came out of that project. But as life goes on, you know, we were headhunted, some of us. A couple of years later, I was headhunted by Kaizer Chiefs. Sam Bata eventually was headhunted by Sundowns, where he is now. But obviously, there was a few other, jobs he had in between. Kevin Johnson also went to Platinum Stars, and then we left the School of Excellence and looked to establish ourselves elsewhere.
Yeah. So before we get into the period at Chiefs, I'd like for us to focus on School of Excellence a bit, because I think that it is quite a special project, especially the type of players that come out from there. They are players who are a cut above the rest in terms of development. And even when you still look today and you see some of these youngsters coming from the School of Excellence, some of them walk straight into first teams of the big teams, and are able to even surpass some of the academy graduates of the other teams. What was key in developing those youngsters, and what was the training methodology like? Because when I look at School of Excellence players, technical ability, spot on, game intelligence, spot on, and this was at a very, very young age.
Well, there's a combination of factors. I think the first thing is we were blessed to have people like Ted Dumitru, Professor Neto, Julio Leal, all of these people that played a huge role in educating us. I think it's about education. I think it's about implementation. I think the difference is today, we initially suffered from the same problems that a lot of academies in South Africa suffer from. The lack of knowing how to apply the knowledge. So we had to learn through trial and error. You only learn from experience. And to be fair to the guys that are working in the industry, they will become better with time. We were at a bit of an advantage because of the time that we'd already spent honing our skills and making sure we had the relevant knowledge. But it wasn't like we were successful from day one. We failed a lot in the process as well. But what we believed in was the type of player we were coaching. We dissected, we discussed, this is the type of player we are developing. It's an African player. He's not 6 foot tall. He's not got all the muscles and strength your Nigerians and your other players have. So how do we train him? We've got to look at his speed. We've got to look at his playing intelligence. We've got to complement his natural skill and enhance that skill. So we would allow players to express themselves, but within a certain structure. We would teach them the basic structures. We would work with them in all 3 moments: in possession, when we lose possession, when we regain, and during you get positive and negative transition. We'd also look at working with them in as far as when they have the ball, which we called initiation, starting the move. So if you're a centre back, we wouldn't want you to take the ball and kick it upfield. We'd involve you.
You can show us, coach.
So let's say we obviously embrace the idea of playing with a back 4, because we believe that if you play with the back 4, you are able. And we would obviously sometimes play with 2 and 1 pivot or 2 pivots, and maybe with even a situation like this, or we'd play with 2 there and play with 4 in the middle there. So we have got 4, 4-2. But the fullbacks always looking to overlap. I remember we had Tsepo Mashishi, Rufus Makoti, eventually we had Dylan Shepherd playing in that role. We always had very good fullback players. But in saying that, obviously let's not forget a very important player, which is the goalkeeper. We would say that if the goalkeeper had the ball, he should be involved in initiating the play. So when he initiates the play and he builds up, let's say we're building on the side, he would then get involved in the build-up. So initiation, participation. This player would then maybe do this, or we would do this.
Oh, come across,
and this player would just slot in there to allow us to maybe build up with players coming closer. So our idea was always to try and ensure that we keep the ball within close distance and build up very gradually, instead of looking to hit the ball long and play off the second ball. And the reason for that was also at that time we realized that we learned this in Brazil, the counter press, people speak about it today. We learned that if we lost the ball within that area, we were able to quickly win back possession. So he's involved now in the participation phase. But while they're building up, he would then look to make the forward run, and in any event, if the ball goes wide, he would then even be, as a centre back, be involved in the finalization, which we call initiation, participation, and finish. So he would be involved in all three phases. We called it the three phases of play. So we wouldn't have a player that plays as a centre back, gets involved with the build-up, and then sits back. So that would apply to every player besides the keeper. Obviously, we didn't want this guy to go up there and be out of position. So I think that principle helped us to develop a player, as you rightly pointed, was very, very comfortable on the ball, technically sound. And that is why every player that you had out of the school, similar to every player you see at Stars of Africa today, whether it's Kabelo Dlamini, whether it is May Maslangu, whether it's they're all technically very gifted. And the reason is we've continued that philosophy. The second thing is that we always ensure that players were made fit with the ball. We very seldomly did laps. We seldomly did gym training. And we just were able to use other forms of strength training, like harnesses. You see guys using resistance training now. Ted had his own harness system. We used to have these rubber bands that we used to have on a player and resist him. And that's what it was. It was more a case of focusing on technical brilliance and football-specific fitness. Tactics would come in, but we developed it within the small-sided game. The 4v4, the 5v5, where the game became the coach. So when we have two goals that you attack, we don't need to tell you to change the point of attack, because you know if you close on this side, you attack that goal. So we used a form of indirect training, because our belief was that it's better to equip a player to make find his own solutions than for us as coaches to constantly shout solutions. Because it's like a case of giving a man a fish or teaching him to fish. If I give you a fish, I feed you for a day. If I teach you to fish,
a lifetime. And how important then were those small-sided sessions? Because when Coach Kevin Johnson sat here, he's like to me, you guys hardly ever used a full pitch to train on. You guys always ensured that the space was small, it was compact, so that would improve the players. How important was that? Because we see a lot of people who like small-sided and who speak about small-sided, but might not really understand why.
I think to answer your second question, there's a fear that if they don't do 11v11 games, players won't adapt to how to utilize the space. To some extent, yes, but you've got to balance the act. We used a lot of small-sided games to ensure that players were capable of playing out of tight situations. To ensure that they had good spatial awareness, because spatial awareness is key. You need to know where you are, where's the opponent, where's your teammate, and that can only happen when you do it under pressure. If you don't put a player through that fire, he's not going to become a top player. You understand that the best players in the world that we marvel at are players that can play in tight spaces. And if you can do it in tight spaces, it becomes so much easier. That played a huge role. And it was a form of training that really gave these individuals the confidence, the self-belief. You know, at the moment we have a kid in the academy, his name is KG. I was telling the guys the other day, he's now turning 16 in December. He plays in the SAB. Put 4 players around him, he'll come out. How he comes out, I can't take credit for it. None of us can. It's something that he's been born with. We encourage it, we develop the raw skill and to find motor skills, and we always support those players. The biggest problem you could have, and I think a lot of times, is when you use a shortcut, which is 11v11, 9v9, it's a shortcut. You're going to get satisfactory football, but you won't get excellence. You're going to have a good result, but not a great performance. Great performances are made up of those moments, those electrifying moments when a guy plays out of a tight situation and he plays through the press and you see them combine and you see a wonderfully taken goal. That is what people remember. People seldom remember a ball being played long to Nurkovic and he heads it down and the player comes out and he hits it. You're going to forget about it after a short while. So I think Kevin is so right. We still believe in it. If you speak to any of our coaches during that era, Mandla Mazibuki is late now, he'll tell you as well. He came on board, Kevin came on board. We believed in it strongly and we didn't change. And I can see that happening now at Mamelodi Sundowns with Rolani as well. He encourages his players to keep possession in those areas, to change the point of attack. Look, there's 3 things you must remember if you want to have a good build-up. There's many others, but these 3 things are important. How to attract pressure. By keeping the ball in the last line, even if it means when the opposition are not pressing you, and then trying to play through the press. The other one is to attract pressure by challenging the opponent. We often see teams passing and passing sideways and never ever going forward because they don't encourage players to challenge the opponent. Because when I challenge you, numerically I'm minusing you from destruction. And also I'm able to play combinations around you. So that's the second. And the last one is, as I showed you earlier on, drawing people over to one side and then ensuring, like we see Pep doing so effectively, having an outlet, whether the outlet is Haaland or whether it's one of his wingers, and then changing the point of attack.
Overloading to isolate.
Absolutely.
So when you then progressed then at the School of Excellence, like you said that a couple of you guys got headhunted, which other teams were interested in your services? Was it only Chiefs at that moment?
Look, Chiefs happened by accident. We were playing in a league where Chiefs also had a team, and it was coached by Ryder Mofokeng and some of the other coaches. Jeff Butler was the head coach. We played at I think it was at Marks Park. And on that particular day, we beat their development team by 4 goals to 1. And I had a player called Moffat Mafuka in midfield. Pansula was a left-sided player. He scored a Roberto Carlos goal. And these guys were marveling at these boys. And they approached me. In fact, it was Ryder. He says, "Coach, how do you manage to get these boys to play like that?" Because at that time, Chiefs was winning every tournament. They had a trophy room. When Kaiser introduced me to the setup, before the Churina was what it is, I only saw trophies. And
now?
Well, they're still winning a lot of, they're still winning a lot of youth tournament trophies. And then when I looked at Kaiser, I said, "Kaiser, I think maybe you have the wrong man if you want to win trophies. I'm a specialist in developing players. Trophies is a bonus." And he smiled. He says, "Okay, I understand where you're going." He's a very wise man. Which office? I said, "No, I don't need the office. I'm working for Transnet, but I'll speak to them so that I can assist you." So I was working for Transnet at the time at the school, and I was working for Kaizer Chiefs. So they approached me and I went, and obviously after the request was made, I joined Chiefs, but I would travel to Esalen Park in the mornings, and in the afternoons I would speed down to Milo Park. We were then involved with UJ. It was then Rau, Rand Afrikaans University. So I made a good relationship with the professors. I had a very good assistant in Ace, because he was an icon, a legend. And as much as he wasn't a coach per se, he didn't have the background, the qualification, he had insight. He knew the game. He would tell me things that I would sometimes marvel at. And together we built a very formidable team. A team that at times when we played even against the first team, Mushin would get angry, kick the icebox because the way these boys, I mean, you had players like Skapi Maladzi, Junior Kani coming through later. Initially the team was made up of, in defense we had Isaac Mabotsa, Klantla Kubeka. Both ended up playing in the first team. Tsepo Mashishi, Rufus Makoti also went to the first team. Moffat Mafuka also, and then eventually moved on. Gerald Sibeko, Mondli Kubeka, Jabu Pule at that time, now Maslango, Sizwa Mningwa. I mean, not forgetting Lucky Phillips, what a keeper. So that was a crop of players that it was like when Manchester promoted their players, the Beckhams, it was similar to that. So, we were able, but in the interim, I think that was a platform for me. Having joined Chiefs, I mean, when anybody else comes knocking, you say, "Sorry, man, this is Chiefs. I'm going to go to Chiefs." Chiefs had such a rich history and such a pedigree that you wouldn't want to go anywhere else. So later on, there was many offers. But after working at Chiefs now, you ask yourself, where to next, So it was a fairy tale. I was blessed both at the school, then subsequently working for Kaizer Chiefs.
Yeah.
And then moving to Santos as well when Mushin left.
Yeah.
It was also a fantastic time winning the ABSA Cup, which is now the Nedbank Cup. And within a season we won that cup, which meant a lot. It was a team that was going into a bit of a decline of the age. We had the John Mbizos, Jean-Marc Itiers, Kamal Said, Idris Bersen. They were getting into their 30s. So to get that team to play was, I think, a huge achievement at the time.
Yeah, and when you look at that time where you're at Chiefs, and you mentioned so many talented youngsters coming through, and I think this is what makes this great, is having you here, because you are spending every day with them. How difficult or how easy is it having to manage such a raw talent which has never had any formal training, probably even struggles with English, speaking English, but it's just a raw talent? How difficult or how easy was it in those times then to manage those talents and to ensure that they could go on then to play for the first team?
I think to start with, it was the relationship that I had with Mushin Etugrau. So how it worked was, when eventually I started gaining some success with promoting players, Transnet called me in and said, okay, we've given you permission. Obviously, it wasn't done in writing, which was a big mistake.
Yeah.
You now have to make up your mind, come back to the school or work at Chiefs. And I said, sure, that's a difficult one.
Yeah.
As much as I want to still be at the school, Chiefs is an opportunity of a lifetime. And I took a package. I walked away from Transnet, worked full-time at Chiefs. So I would coach with Mushin in the morning, which helped me a lot. He invited me over because that's a time when he was on the verge of winning the league. Patrick Mbutu and Jabu Pule went AWOL. And that one game was the difference between winning the league and losing it. And we drew that game or lost it against Roy Barreto. I think he was coaching Mtata Bushbaks at the time. I'm not too sure. And Mushin was really destroyed by that. And somebody said, listen, maybe invite Farouk over, which he did. And we had a very, very good relationship. And I would see what the requirements was at the first team. And I would pass that on. I would pass that information on. And as much as some of the players were not at that level, both intellectually and otherwise, I would try and close that gap because I knew what was required at the top level, which was a great aid. Yeah. And also the likes of a couple of very important players, Jabu being one who was naturally gifted. Unbelievable. Gerald Sibeko, Rufus Makoti, Moffat Mafuka, and Tsepo Mashishi were all from development. They came from the school. So I also had the advantage of having at least 30% players that had come through development. That's so important because Tsepo Mashishi, who's now with brand director or manager at Puma, was with me from the age of 10 when I was still coaching Mayfair Spurs. I used to go to Tipkloof and fetch him. He was very close to John Shoes Michel. That's why they call him Shoes as well. So John Shoes was also living in Tipkloof. So this balance helped me. So the other players that I inherited then eventually started adapting. And we played a very, very, exciting, attacking brand of football. Every curtain raiser we played at Joburg Stadium, the fans would know already who those players were. Yeah. We didn't have the DDC, which was a pity. So we played in an amateur league, but we dominated those leagues. The one year, we weren't allowed to play in the, I think it was the Nedbank, one of those competitions. You couldn't have Kaizer Chiefs first team and... Yeah. So we qualified for the later rounds. And we were instructed, you must lose this game because you can't have two teams. And me and he said, no ways. And then obviously the referees were told they will lose the game, and we lost the game to block us from getting through because you couldn't have two teams from a PSL club and having one of their junior teams playing in that competition. Yeah. So it was a fantastic group of players. Yeah. And the good thing is, that players that came through were immediately able to be used by Mushin. Yeah. Mushin was a visionary. He knew how to, because I think something we miss today in our football fraternity, generally speaking, we don't really improve players that we get into our teams. Meaning, when you get a situation where you sign a player, your job is not over. Some of those players need to be improved. You look at Tenash Nengomash. You look at a lot of those players that came from under 20 national teams. They were improved at Chiefs at the time with Mushin and later on with Ted. They were improved. I use an example. When Stones signed for Man City, I was one of the biggest critics. When Grealish signed, I said, how can you spend so much money? when I look at Grealish a season later, I'm like, wow, look at this player. When I look at Stones, he was an ordinary central defender, typical English defender.
Yeah.
And you look at him today. So that is the secret of what Pep does. He doesn't just bring you in, he improves you. And to do that, you have to have knowledge of how to mold players. That I think was why Mushin and I got along. He knew I could mold a player.
Yeah.
And I knew he could progress a player. And I knew he would, from a tactical point, give that player the identity. So we complemented each other.
Yeah.
The same thing with Ted. Ted said to me, I requested from Kaiser to bring you because I know how you can assist me. Because it's always difficult, at Chiefs to win league titles. It's not easy.
Yeah. So I want to look at these two gentlemen that you worked with closely and you learned a lot from. We'll start with Ted. What made him so special? And what are some of the things that you still carry with you today? I know that you've learned so much, but what are the key things that you carry with you today that you learned from Ted?
Well, firstly, I think what makes Ted special because he was very passionate. His whole life revolved around football. I think there was nothing else in Ted's life besides football. Whether it be when he was unemployed in the PSL, whether it be when he was an instructor to us as a coaching instructor, or whether it be when he ran those centers, similar to what I do today. Yeah. His passion overrode everything and his principle. He wouldn't take on a job if it wasn't exactly what he would be able to achieve from. In other words, he wouldn't be a coach who would come on board and you would dictate to him. Never. He knew what he wanted and he was very firm on that. So he was a coach with huge pedigree. And I learned so much from him that today when I read some of his notes, and I'm talking about 30 years odd that has gone by, I still look back and I learned something new from it. Because when you look at that note, 30 years ago, we were so inexperienced that you could only read the surface. You couldn't read what was deeper. And now when I look at it based on my own experience, I realize what this man was all about. Yeah. So he was a visionary. He spoke about the 5-5 formation. He spoke about, he said football will eventually be played with a 5-5. Okay? And everybody thought, what is this old man saying? What is a 5-5 formation? Okay, so he would say you'd have a pivot, you'd have your back four, and then you'll have a defensive midfielder with two spinners and then two attackers. They could then be interchanged very easily. Yeah. And I now see what he meant was that with any given time, these guys would be involved, with obviously these guys supporting and even these guys attacking at the same time. But what would happen in transition? Because obviously when we talk about formations, we talk about it in isolation. We talk about a 4-4-2. Yeah. But when you attack, the formation is not a 4-4-2. It changes. It changes constantly. It could become 3 at the back. You could overload the midfield and have 5 across the middle and maybe even 2 up front, you could have 2 strikers up front with 1 player in behind the pocket there, with 2 sitting in there. It could become a 3-4. It could just change into any number whatsoever. But when possession was lost and you were able to pressurize the opposition, they would come back into that formation so quickly, whether it be a medium block, whether it be a low block, and then they would protect the team. They would be in preventative coverage. I hear people call it rest defense. Okay, we call it preventative coverage. I think it's the same thing. So it depends now. And the players would be so clued up that they would know exactly how to use the press, because there's pressure and there's press. So when we talk about press, we don't realize times when the opposition have the ball, we need to put pressure and not press them, because we would give them a false sense that they would be able to play through the line, but at a certain given time, when they have the ball, when they have the ball there, we would just shadow them and put pressure on them, not press them, put pressure, and force them into situations where even our midfielders would be able to mark in advance if need be, that they would be in anticipatory marking position. Yeah. So they'd anticipate when that ball is played, this guy is already on his bicycle and he travels with the ball, and then they double mark the opponent and win the ball back in their half. Yeah. So this was the visionary this man had. We talk about zonal defending. He introduced us to zonal defending even before we went to Brazil. Sure. And Brazil is big on it. Brazil started this zonal defending when teams in Europe were still going man to man. Man to man, yeah. They were already, and it's one of the best forms of defending, because you're marking the zone and not the individual. And especially when you're playing against skillful players, it would be madness to mark man to man. You know, you have a player who's very skillful. like Patrick Masangweni was a boy from our academy, he's now playing at SUPERSPORT.
Yeah.
Very skillful. Or even a Kabelo Dlamini, or even a Jabu Pule, or even a Zwane. These are skillful players. I mean, even if you look at some of the players that have come through, like Mabena now from the School of Excellence, very tricky players. So you wouldn't want to mark them man-to-man. You give them personal attention in moments, but zonal defending. And that has to be coached systematically and progressively. I would say from the age of about 14, you need to start working on that in different forms. Not overcoach, because that can also become detrimental.
And then when we move on to Coach Machine, and he's very colorful character and personality. We've all seen it, you know. What did you learn from him, and what was it like working with him? And also then when you guys went on and won some of those titles, what was that like?
We won everything besides the league.
What was that like?
Sure, Mushin was something else, out of this world. He's a coach that has so much insight, so much knowledge. He comes from a background where he's basically, I wouldn't say a student of the game, where he's become a professor of the game. Because he's now been currently involved with UEFA, where he's sitting on the panel, and you don't get onto that panel for nothing. But as a human being, the most wonderful person to interact with socially. When it comes to work, you got to be at your best. You know, he doesn't compromise, and he doesn't cut corners. Everything is professionally done. Often a person who was very misunderstood because of his emotions, because of his passion. When you see Mushin getting angry, it's not because he's angry, it's because he's passionate. But he learned to understand eventually how our players take that. And he was then able to manage it a little bit more calmly. But generally, I mean, knowledge-wise, you learn every day when you sit with him. When you just sit with the man and you talk to him, and he discusses patterns of play and he discusses coaching methodology, you have to be a sponge. Just to take in. Similarly to Ted also, but two different personalities. Ted more but reserved in his approach, not showing that amount of passion. Mushin, he's a Turk, he's a German, he comes from a German background. They're very emotional people. They show their feelings, they show their emotions.
And which trophy would you say is the one that stood out for you guys?
Sure, we won so many trophies, but I think for me the Mandela Cup, because of the way it was won. You must remember in those days when you signed players, and those players were not registered to play in that competition, you can't play them. Kenny Nimak, many of those players we signed couldn't play. So we were sitting with a team that had Dr. Kumalo on the bench, Claudio on the bench, and I think it was another youngster, what was his name? One of the younger players that we recruited. Those were the three subs we had on the bench. Can you imagine you playing in a huge competition like that and you're sitting with three subs? Doctor was at the end of his tenure. Claudio was a third choice keeper. And Rene Richards, that's the boy. Rene Richards was still a very young player. So now you're sitting with this dilemma and you're playing against Ismailia from Egypt. You're playing against top teams from all over Africa. And you still manage to win the cup. Mabedi scoring a beautiful penalty at the end. That was a huge achievement. And just to have a great man like Madiba's name on that trophy meant so much to us. I mean, it was out of this world. Although people sometimes undervalue it and say, it's not the Champions League. But it's a CAF competition. To win that tournament is not easy. And it's not like we're winning the tournament now every time.
And in recent years, your name has been linked to Kaizer Chiefs. Would it be a place that you would go back to if the opportunity presented itself?
Look, I have had several interactions with them on the same question. I think the challenge is I have an academy in the moment. How do you then justify Farouk working for Chiefs? And I understand where they're coming from. But it's an academy that's grown. It's an academy that is developed and exported, I think, a number of players, if not the most players, to Europe, to Portugal, to Sweden, and even to England, with Tukelo Ranti playing at Bournemouth at some time. So to have it just wished away, it's not possible. Maybe they should consider adopting it as a satellite. And then I would gladly go back and assist, because there's still a lot of love and passion. When you're with a club like this, it's not a surprise that you say Kosi for life, because it grows on you. And the people you work with, the chairman himself, is a wonderful person to be associated with and work with, because very fair and a very supportive person. So yes, of course, but it's not something that is within my powers to decide. You know?
It has to be done the right way.
Yeah, obviously, you know, if and when the time arises and we see there's value add from both sides, I don't want to be seen like somebody now looking to just... And at the same time, my intentions are all very honest and dignified. I want to just assist in any capacity, whatever it means to help the team, because I think the team is an institution. People say it, but sometimes they don't portray it.
Yeah.
You know, and to be quite fair, there's a lot of potential. I think the experiences that we had in the past, we've created, not only us, but even before us.
Yeah.
There were some great teams that Chiefs had. They've set the bar, and people at this moment are starved of that cup or that trophy or that silverware, and they become a bit calmer. But the longer you take to win it, the more impatience sets in. You know, it just takes one game to change the whole scenario. Now that they've gone to the semis, everybody's excited. They have to keep the momentum now.
Yeah. So another important step in your career that maybe that many might not know of is your time spent at Mamelodi Sundowns. How did that come about?
You look, when Middendorf came to Chiefs, there was just a disconnect in as far as his method of training and what I was used to. And, you know, being a person who's very strong-minded, I challenged some of that, and he had then come with an assistant himself. So when, you know, you come with your own assistant and you guys get along, and, you know, I feel like the odd one out,
speak their
three's
own
a company, and they speak their own language. You said it, I didn't say so. And you eventually end up putting cones, and you say, hang on, I've got all these qualifications, why am I putting down cones? And then, you know, you approach the club and they say, no, work it out. But obviously the coach had his preference.
Yeah.
And it was for him when I decided to move on. I suppose it was what he wanted at the time. And I moved on. And it was just not even a month or so later, and Sundowns came looking. Gordon Ingerson was the coach. And I joined him. Also, wonderful guy. Learned a bit different aspects of the game from him. He was not really so much into the tactical and the psychological and the scientific side, but he was a very street-wise coach. Yeah. He knew how to get the best out of players. Yeah. But you had to ensure that you supported him with quality players, and he would give you a winning team. He had that ability. Very pragmatic coach. Yeah. So yeah, it was a good time I had there with him, and then Stars of Africa came knocking. Yeah. Now
this is how I want to ask this question, because having done my research, I then get to understand that there was the opportunity for Stars of Africa, but you were still at Mamelodi Sundowns. And at that time, your life was going really well, financially as well. And Mr. Mutsipe had the conversation with you with regards to maybe one day prospectively you'd become the head coach, but then here's this opportunity. Now, what was that period like from a psychological and emotional perspective, having to make that decision?
It was a very difficult decision. It came about that I was sort of advising. I was in an advisory capacity to Stars of Africa, but my key job was working for Sundowns, where President Musepe looked after us. You can't believe how well this man looked after players. So you got a good salary, you got a good environment, the team is doing well. And then along comes this opportunity where a gentleman by the name of Bo Nielsen is on a mission to sign Siyabonga Nkosi from Bloem Celtic. And he comes over, and my partner Nadim, who's based in Portugal, introduces him to me. And this man is as cold as ice. I'm having a conversation and I'm telling him about our football, and he's looking at me like, what is this guy talking about? And for some reason that evening, I part ways with him, not very impressed with him, because the man doesn't talk. You know, they say the place is cold, but it seems the people are just as cold. So anyhow, there's a Steve Compera is coaching the under-23s, Amaglukuk, and I go to a match in Rustenburg. And when the match is finished, I get a phone call. Guess who's on the other side? Bo Nielsen, and he's excited. It's like a split personality. The guy is shouting, Farouk, we must talk, we must talk. Eventually I found out the academy boys played against Wits, and what he saw made him change his mind 360. He then said, listen, I'm going back to Helsingborg. I want to adopt this academy. I want it to become a feeder, because at that time you had Mamelodi Sundowns, Tukelo Ranti, Amethyst Ralan. You had all these players in the academy. Tefo Mashamati came later, but also, and what he saw impressed him. And then he went to them and he said, look, and I thought, okay, they'll leave me in the capacity of advisor. They came back, they said, look, we're prepared to sponsor, but you have to come on full time. Sure.
Yes.
I sat with my family and spoke to them, because now it meant that they were only going to sponsor the academy, not me getting a salary.
Yeah.
So I had to forsake a well-paid job for zero. And, you know, thinking back now, I don't regret it one bit, because things worked out.
Yeah.
It could have gone absolutely egg-shaped. And I took this, I took the, what do you call it, the leap.
Yeah.
And it took 5 or 6 years before we saw anything. The only time we saw anything is when Tukelo went from Malmo to Bournemouth. Remember, that was a time when we gave him to Orlando Pirates. Didn't get anything at that time because he was still a young player.
Yeah.
But it was a good platform for him, because I said to him, Benny's there. Become buddies with Benny. He's going to teach you a lot. And I think Benny did a hell of a lot of good work with getting this guy's mind adjusted. Obviously, what happened afterwards is beyond your control. That's another problem in South Africa, where the social aspect, the psychosocial aspect becomes a hindrance. We've lost so many top players because of that. I mean, Tukelo was the first player to score 2 goals in Nigeria. And then we had great strikers before him that could never score a goal, including Benny and Sean. But he went there. So he had the potential. But long story short, we took the dive, we took the leap. And I ended up coaching Stars of Africa, where I'm still presently at.
Yeah, no, that was a very tough. Do you think you get that from Ted? Because earlier on in the conversation, you said that Ted is one of those guys that he's not willing to sacrifice his principles, and he's willing to take the leap when it makes sense. You know. Yeah,
I think that, and my upbringing. You know, the family were very much involved with the struggle as far as the politics were concerned. The modern day. Some family members had to go into exile. So we grew up with a very strong mentality that if something is not right, don't make it right. Even if it means you got to suffer in the process. But if you believe in something and you believe in your principles and your ethics, you will succeed eventually. I mean, nobody gave us a chance with this academy. We had not a cent of sponsorship. Nadim sold his Audi to sponsor the academy. We lived in a house that I had that we converted into academy. I'm gonna show you pictures one day when you come visit. We had those steel tables that we ate on. The boys used to go to a school, Tusk Academy, down the road. We had to find money to school them as well. We didn't have training fields. At times we would jump over fences at UJ to get fields.
Just to train.
Just to train. And the security would come and marshal us out. So we had nothing. But we had this belief. We trained on a dusty field across from where I lived. Now it's a beautiful center that they built. But the belief and the determination. We had a bus called Blackberry. When that Blackberry used to take Tukelo to Pirates grounds, the guys used to laugh at him because they used to come with their Porsches and they say, hey, TK, you coming with Blackberry? Because our driver used to come with one player in the bus and drop him off at Rand Stadium. So these were all challenges that we went through. But it only made us stronger.
So when you look at your time and at Stars of Africa, and you look at how you set up a development program with regards to the long term, because what a lot of people don't understand in South Africa, that the ideal time would be 7 to 10 years of development for a footballer. So if we're to then break that down and look at ages, that is why in Europe, by the time they're 18, 19, they're ready, because at 8 they were already developing, at 9 they were already developing. But the challenge becomes now in South African football, you discover them at 15, 16, you know. So how then do you set up a program that is able then to ensure that you can develop those boys, some of them having to fast track them? What has that been like with regards to setting up a long-term program, developing boys?
That was a huge challenge, because most of the players we got were players that were recommended to me based on the fact that I was at Chiefs and so many people loved this club. I had referrals of players. Most of them were referrals from former players, from coaches, etc. But they were not at the right age, as you rightly pointed out. They were like 16, 17. Tukelo came at 16. Can you imagine if I had Tukelo at 8 years old? Tukelo used to hit everything but the goal. He used to hit the birds, the clouds. And it became frustrating. The guys used to say to me, Coach, man, this guy's missing, man. Why are you? I said, no. be patient. There's something here. Look at the fire in the eyes. Look at the physicality. Look at the speed.
Yeah.
Where do you get a striker with the speed? And the guys used to constantly coach, man. This guy's costing. I said, no. And I would find time to work with him individually and collectively. So it meant that I had to get up at 5 in the morning, the first session, which was mostly about physicality, because you had to develop a good physical base with the ball and without the ball at times. And then in the afternoons, we would train not for an hour, sometimes for 3 hours, sometimes for 4, working individually. I mean, I was a slave driver to an extent, but I needed to get the best in the shortest period. Because if you look at the complete cycle of a play, it takes 8 to 10 years. Now you're bringing that down to about 3 to 4 years. You know, you got to squash all that in. And at times, you got to even bring them at home to my house at night to show videos. So my social life was even being impacted. But my wife was very understanding. So they would sit and I would show them videos and say, look at this player, look what he does. So it was a small group of about 20 players living in-house. And we spent so much individual time on them that we were able to produce the likes of May Maslango. May would do his own physical. We had a lot of homework where they would do their own physical work. He became a great believer in pull-ups. So there was a pull-up bar in the academy, and he would spend time on that pull-up bar. You know, what you see people do often now, physically, where they work the core. Now there's what we call a bridge, and there's different positions that you do within a bridge. We went up to 7 minutes in a bridge. When me and them were doing it in Europe, they said, this is not possible. How can you do 7 minutes of a bridge? The core became so strong. But it's because of the type of training we put them through. There was a simple thing I used to do, because some of them were physically underdeveloped, because of socioeconomic conditions. Boy comes from an area where he doesn't get the right nutrition. But now you got to make him stronger. And you got to make him stronger in a way where you complement it with basic diet. So we would depend on a lot of pap, mahero, mahodi, all of these different traditional foods. We didn't go for pastas in it because we realized these boys will grow on their own natural diet the best. But I would work in pairs. But I would work 30 seconds, you do a physical exercise. 30 seconds, I do. And we do that for 3 repetitions per exercise times 10 exercises. When they finish, the floor used to be wet. People in the then, Vodacom, we didn't play in the SAB, we played one higher. We played under the team called Alex United because we bought its status. They would say, Coach, no man, these boys are taking steroids because they were more older. How can maybe doing this box to box? We were in the last 32 of the Nedbank. Last 32 played against Bloemfontein, team from Bloemfontein Tigers. They were playing in the first division. We took them to the wire. They couldn't believe it. They said, Coach, unbelievable. But this was only because of the dedication and the commitment from the players and from the technical staff. And believe me, we didn't have much resources. I wasn't being paid. The coaches were given stipends, but we persevered. We believed in the dream. And the dream paid off. The first player was Sibusiso Kumalo. At 17, signed for Morocco Swallows. Left-footed player. What a player. Then came May Maslango. Later on it came Ranti. Then it came Tefo Mashamati. Then it came Rolani. He was brilliant. People brought him back in his 30s and he was still good at Cape Town City.
He was still very, very good. Singh, you can see,
what's his name? Pule Maretsani. All of these players came later. Abelo Dlamini. I mean, there's a list of players that came. Not at the same level, because no human being is the same, but we're different. I think if we had the resources that a lot of clubs have, I think we could produce even better players. Because where we struggle is on ensuring they have the right diet and the supplements that's expensive and the training facilities and the gymnasiums to put them. We don't have that, so we have to improvise. But we're still managing to do some good work.
To develop really, really good talent. I want us to speak about the other side now that a lot of people don't really want to touch on, or a lot of the other clubs, they look away when you have this conversation. How difficult is it to go through situations where now some of the boys that you developed, for example, Patrick, who's now at SUPERSPORT, examples like that, guys who maybe you didn't get compensation on, but these boys, you put so much time and effort in them. How difficult is that? Because I think this is one of the most important conversations when it comes to Stars of Africa, because I personally know that this is a challenge, and the bigger clubs, they look away because they're benefiting, because they've got a player, they didn't have to pay compensation. What is that like?
It's very painful. It's extremely painful. You look at Patrick, for example. We sent Patrick to Portugal, played in a second division team or third division team, Academica. Took a while for him because of injuries, etc. But now what happens is they don't accommodate him, the club. We got to pay for his accommodation. We got to pay for a physical trainer. He had his own personal trainer, one of the best physical trainers in the world today. A lot of the top players that go from Portugal to other top football, they're under his tutelage. But we have access to him. We met him, myself and Ike met him there as well. So he doesn't come cheap. The nutrition doesn't come cheap. It's not only him. It's Juninho Palace as well, was with him there at the time. And we paid for the expenses. But obviously these boys are a little bit impatient to play professional football, and it's not as easy as that. When you get there, you got players coming from all over the world, especially Brazil. A lot of the players that don't make it big time, but are great players, come to Portugal and use Portugal as a platform to launch their careers from. So after a couple of years there, frustration, contract was over, came back. Then he went to go and train with SUPERSPORT, and they signed him. Now, I don't want to point fingers at SUPERSPORT, because obviously if they can get a player for nothing, why should they be paying for it? I think the compensation rules should apply to every player. And that is what's happened when we take a player like Luther Singh. Every time he moves, the academy gets compensation. And they do pay because they're scared. FIFA will deduct points, FIFA will impose some fines on them. But in certain parts, like for example, America, we got a boy there, Tsiki. He's now playing in the MLS. We can't claim because they're not within that spectrum jurisdiction, so they don't pay. Saudi Arabia, we got Sandile Pete. They don't pay us anything. So it's not only the PSL. There's a lot of people that are getting away with this compensation act because it's not clear. You can't use a compensation rule that says you got to pay a club 2,000 rand a year, based on the fact that that player is traveling to and fro from training. We housing the player, we feeding the player, we transporting the player, we schooling the player. There's a cost involved. Now, how do we get that cost back? Very difficult. I can name 10 players now currently playing in the PSL. They haven't received a cent. The other day, Junaid Said won a player. And I tweeted, oh, wonderful. I'm proud. That's all I can do.
I know. I've seen it. I always see your tweets. When your boys, I
try
see
to get mileage in that way. I can't get any financial. So I get mileage in that way.
I've seen it. No, that's really unfortunate. But I do hope that in the near future that could be something that can be resolved, because Stars of Africa has been, so important to football, not just here in South Africa, but, world over, with regards to the players you've been sending. So once we can start to see that rule come into place and come into effect, I think it would really help, and not just Stars of Africa, but also maybe other independent, smaller academies.
I was going to say that, even if I don't, as an academy, benefit, I don't mind. It's okay, life goes on. We'll find other ways. God has blessed us in other ways to continue. We'll find it. I'm talking about the aspirant young coach who wants to start an academy, to start a business. We're talking about unemployment in the country. We're talking about our former legends not getting. How in heaven's name are you going to entice them when they know compensation is not going to come? We want to say to those guys, listen, there's an opportunity. Similar to the Brazilian model. In Brazil, they encourage former legends, people who are students of the game, to start academies because they want to create a big base of talent. And a lot of players don't necessarily come from big clubs, they come from those small academies. But what they do is, and this is important to remember, they turn it into a form of foreign export. Now how it works is, it's brilliant how these guys work. They're a third world country, but football, they are very intelligent and brilliant. They develop this big reservoir of talent, and they sometimes subsidize these smaller guys from the FA to start these projects, because they know they're not going to subsidize you forever. They'll tell you, listen, buddy, next couple of years we subsidize. After that, make sure players are coming through. So when Neymar goes to play for Paris Saint-Germain or for Barcelona, his earnings is taxed as a Brazilian citizen, but also he brings all that money back into Brazil. Currently, you watched Real Madrid. How many Brazilians did they have last night? At least 3.
Yeah, so many.
Right. So those are 3 highly paid individuals. Man City will have at least 1, the goalkeeper. They had few before. Man United, at least 3 or 4. So any team I say to you in the top ranks, they have got a few Brazilians. If you look at their total earnings that are taxable and that they reinvest in the country, it's a form of export. Can we imagine if we had the same model where we had our players being well developed by these different individuals, whether it be the PSL clubs, whether it be in the individual people like myself and other academies, and we are subsidized, and this industry is properly regulated. Can you imagine how many players are going to be playing in Europe, earning big bucks, bringing it back like we had with Benny McCarthy and Stephen Pinar.
Yeah.
They were big earners. They came back and they reinvested in the country. Then the other spin-off is our national team.
Yeah.
How powerful is our national team going to become?
Yeah.
So all of these have some sort of impact. And I don't know why people can't see that. Why is it that we are so lax? It's not a difficult thing to do. There is companies, there is monies available.
Yeah.
We just need to drive the process and say, listen, Luyelo, you are doing a good job. We want to fund you. We're giving you this amount of time. We want to see results. It's not just a handout.
Yeah.
You must make sure there's results. Monthly reports, yearly reports. How's the money being spent? Put the systems into place. But I'll be so happy to see that happening, because at the stage we were at school, the majority of players that were playing in the national teams came from the school.
Yeah.
And many of those went abroad to play in the top leagues.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like the fact that you mentioned Brazil being a third world country. South Africa is a third world country. Now, what are some of the differences? Why can't we get to that level? Because I know this is a topic that you're very passionate about, especially because you spend so much time in Brazil. You understand the philosophy, you understand the culture. They being third world, having very similar socio-economic problems as us. But now, what is the difference? Why is there such a huge gap? I understand that we might not win 5 World Cups like they have, but why is the gap so huge when we are very similar countries?
Look, they have similar problems like we have. I think a lot of the best talent come from Africa, hereditary. You talk back to Pelé, they have roots in Africa. There wasn't black people in Brazil at that time. It was more local inhabitants, the local Indians that were there at the time in the Amazon as well as other parts of. But what they've done subsequently, they've realized the potential is so huge. They've invested huge sums of money into development. If you go to Zico School, you can see state of the art. If you go to any academy, they tell you, when you get there, they tell you, God has blessed us with 2 things, football and women.
Yeah.
And they are correct in both regards. Their women are out of this world.
Yeah.
Kevin will tell you that.
Yeah.
Their football is out of this world.
Yeah.
There will never be a time in football in the world that Brazil will not export talent. They have those special players. There's a player, I can't get his name now, signed for Real Madrid. He's too young now to join them. But he's, I think, 16 or 17.
Enrique.
They say he's something out of this world.
Yeah.
Yesterday I read an article where they said the 2 boys from Real Madrid are 21 years old.
Yeah.
And they already played in the World Cup.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
And they've won the UEFA Champions League.
Thank you. So it shows now the pedigree of players.
Yeah.
I can tell you without a doubt, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, we have equally gifted talent that Brazil have in abundance. The difference is, it's like having a lot of diamonds underground but never mining it. They're extracting the diamonds, they're cutting it, they're polishing it, they're putting it into a ring or into a bracelet. We're not doing that. We're expecting the talent to emerge. And if we are doing it, we're doing it in very small pockets.
Yeah.
We need to have kids starting the basic technical football, rugby, cricket, all are different sports. I think rugby and cricket is doing it to some extent.
Yeah.
Football, not so much.
Yeah.
We're not getting kids in school to get the right basic education for football. So when a kid gets to my level at 14 and 15, I still got to teach him how to run, how to control the ball, how to pass. All those fundamental things should be done at a very young age, as you said.
Yeah.
So when they get to the next level, the coach doesn't have to do remedial work.
Yeah.
So I think maybe in a very basic way I'm explaining to you, there's obviously other things that can be done better. But I think, firstly, with schools, they need to introduce football as, or sport, not football, but just PE as part of the curriculum. Like when we were kids, we had to do twice a week, we had to do physical education for an hour. Too many kids are growing obese. Too many kids are going to become older, obese people that cost the country a lot on medical aid and all of that. If we become a nation where physical education can be a part of our move forward, I think we're going to produce better athletes, not only in football, but in all sports.
World, yeah. Coach, you know, I love having a conversation with you. I think we could have conversations for hours and hours.
Not one show is enough.
Yeah, no, it never is. But there's 2 segments left before we wrap this episode up. The first segment is top 5 coaches.
Yeah.
So I want your top 5 coaches of all time.
Top 5 in the world.
Yeah, it could be, okay, let's do it like this. I want, we'll separate it into South African, so the ones who've been in the PSL, and then you can give me the world.
Okay, let me start by looking at South Africa from the time I started watching football. I mean, I'm sure there was other coaches pre that, but it was coaches that probably came from Europe.
Yeah.
And to some extent, they added value, but they also diluted our football to a large extent. They coached the skill out of our players. But I think a coach like Ted Dumitru came and he reintroduced that we can play with skill and still be successful in flair and identity. Yeah. So I said Ted for me, Mushin for me, not in that order. I think both of them were great coaches. Yeah. I think, let me think quickly now who else was quite instrumental. That had a huge impact but also left something for us. I think currently, you got a young coach like Rulani Mokoena. He's shown a lot of potential, but I wouldn't say one of the greatest yet. He still has a long way to go. Yeah. But yeah, him, for a short time when he was here, Julio Leal showed a lot. As a foreign coach coming into South Africa, I would put him in the top 5 as well. Kevin Hunt, for me, was also very successful. And you can't undermine Gordon Ingerson as well. For me, those are I would say the top 5 coaches. There were other great coaches as well that came along, but I think if you look at silverware, you look at consistency and what they've achieved in our, I would say, when football became professional, truly professional. Yeah. Those are the coaches that come to mind, that I would say. Yeah. Foreign, there's so many. Yeah. There is so many. Carlos Pereira winning a World Cup at the time he did. But not forgetting the coach like Pep Guardiola, what he's meant to football. Yeah. The Leeds coach didn't win much silverware. What's his name? I can't get his name.
Previously, Bielsa. Yeah.
He was a shining light for so many coaches. Yeah. Bielsa for me is also one of the great coaches, but not as far as winning things. You know, but still, I mean, very instrumental. The current Real Madrid coach is very impressive to me. Carlo Ancelotti. Yeah. What a coach. So I would say in that order, those come to mind. Yeah. You know, there's other good coaches that were there as well, achieved a lot. Yeah. But I think those for me stand out. I mean, within our history, there's other coaches that came before them. Yeah. But I didn't have much time to see them play, you know. And obviously television only came later in our lives to see some of the great teams and great coaches. Yeah. Ferguson, can't forget him. What a coach, what a history, what a, you know. So there's many. Yeah. But I think if you look at Ancelotti, you look at Ferguson, you look at Pep, those are the ones that come to mind. They stand out for their achievements and the clubs they coach, big clubs, you know. Yeah. So the last Tele Santana, sorry. Yeah. Great coach, but also didn't achieve that much as far as silverware and, you know, he was thereabouts. Yeah. So the last segment, this one normally puts everybody on the spot. I want the best 11 players that you've coached. Phew. Or your best 11, you can mix it, you can have some of the ones that you coached. Well, there's many that come to mind. I think Itumeleng Khune for me as a goalkeeper comes to mind. I had a very short time with him. Remember, Itumeleng Khune was a junior at Kaizer Chiefs. He wasn't in the reserve team which I coached. Yeah. But at some stage he was chased by Ryder to go home because he didn't have the right haircut. And I found him outside and I invited him to train with the academy team. Yeah. And as young as he was, 14, 15, he would sometimes play and he was brave. And I raved about him often to Kaiser. And I said, this boy, I said it. And if Kaiser remembers, he'll tell you. I said, this boy is going to be the next Bafana keeper. Based on one thing, his character is hard. And his ability to want to improve. Yeah. So I think for me, he comes to mind. Yeah. Then you had Isaac Mabotsa, Tlantla Kubeka, but also Patrick Mabedi was great. So was Fabian McCarthy. But the ones I coached extensively would be Isaac Mabotsa and Tlantla Kubeka, center backs. And Moffat Mofuka, central midfielder, made it up then just, faded a bit later on. Went to Santos, went to other clubs, but I think he was phenomenal. Seppo Mashishi, brilliant fullback. I think, again, when I mentioned some of them, they don't sound familiar, but they were great players. They were just not in the right place at the right time. Sometimes you must understand, when you get to a team who has as rich talent as Chiefs have, now you got to have Cyril Nzama. Now you got to stand in line.
Yeah.
Cyril is at another level. He's playing brilliantly. So Seppo Mashishi had to wait and then had to move on to other clubs. He went to Benoni United. He went to Maritzburg. But what a player. Rufus, one of the best crosses. These two were one of the best crosses. They were like Brazilian fullbacks because I molded into that. And then obviously we played with the false wing. I used to play with two strikers up. Sizwe Mningwa, also a top player. You wouldn't even know him existed, but what a striker. Jabu Pule was brilliant there. I would say, for me, Amethyst Ralani.
Yeah.
Brilliant player, yeah. I would say Tokelo Ranti, brilliant player. May Mashlango, brilliant player, yeah. And also, not forgetting Collins and Besuma for me. So it's a mixture of experience, those that have made it, but they come to mind. There's so many others that were excellent. I mean, if you look at this position, you can't ignore Sibusiso Kumalo.
Yeah.
Great fullback.
Yeah.
Fantastic. You look at Tefu Mashamaiti. What a centre back. What a pleasure. So, it's putting me on the spot to say which is better.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are the ones that come to mind. I can go on with the current crop of youngsters that are also coming through. What a joy coaching them. Yeah. But I hope and pray that I continually develop them, and all of them have different characteristics. Yeah. But the ones that stand out will always be the Jabu Pulas. Yeah. Or the Amethyst Ralali. Amethyst would be a player that can minimize 6 defenders. He could do that and score. Yeah. Luther, when his peak, when I say peak, he's still a young man, but when he started showing signs, was a breath of fresh air. Yeah. Unbelievable. You look at even this boy Patrick Masangwe, could have gone to greater heights. Yeah. Hopefully he will still do so. I think he's still young enough to do so. So I think in one way I have a gift, a touch to produce good players. I don't know what is a gift. Everybody's born with a gift. Yeah. God gives us all gifts in different ways. I just feel I have that. And I'm not saying it out of a boastful way. Yeah. I just think it's something that I have to take cognizance of, and I have to use it properly. Not in a way where I'm proud and arrogant, but in a way where it makes changes. You see, for me, the biggest thing, my brother, is making a change in somebody's life. Yeah. When May comes to me as an orphan, mom and dad passed away, he's living with a granny, can't speak a word of English. When I asked him after training, boys, what did you learn? This boy disappears. And then later on, he starts speaking a bit of what he's seen. But today, you hear May, you won't stop him, he's worse than me. But then, May becomes a multi-millionaire. Builds his granny a house, builds his sister a house, builds himself a mansion, financially secure. He's an icon in his community. That makes me so happy to say I've changed the life. It's more important that you use football to change lives than to put yourself on a pedestal. Yeah. Sometimes when people come to me and they take pictures, I feel so humble because I feel, why is this people doing this? Yeah. I'm nobody. I'm just doing a job. Yeah. This is my calling.
Yeah. Coach, this is definitely your calling. Thank you very much, Coach.
Always a pleasure. Nice talking to you.
I really enjoyed it. I know that this is the first of many conversations we have. Sure. Be it on camera, off camera, when I do come and pay a visit.
Please, you're welcome.
Thank you very much for the invite, Coach.
You and your old technical team.
No, thank you very much for your time, Coach. I truly appreciate this time, and I had a lovely time, and I really hope that those at home who watch this enjoy it as well, and they take so much knowledge as well, because you were able then to get us into the mind of the great late Ted, which is so much wealth that he brings and so much wealth that you bring. And Coach, I wish you all the best going forward with Stars of Africa.
Thank you.
With the analysis at SUPERSPORT, we listen to commentary as well. Yeah, so I just wish you all the best in all that you do, and I pray and hope that may God continue to bless you and
much appreciated.
Sharpen that gift as well, so that you produce more players, and most importantly that Stars of Africa eventually gets that financial backing and gets that sponsorship.
God willing. Thank you, sir. Thanks, Luke.
So that was yet another special episode of Diski Talk with Liolo. Thank you much for tuning in. Signing out.